everyone, Jessie here, and coming to you with this month's video. And I wanted to touch base. I'm out in this amazing area. It's the Grafton Notch State Park here in Maine, and this is probably about 10 miles outside of my backyard, which I'm so very grateful for. As you can see, we have some great waterfalls running in the background, and it's a little canyon area right in through here, so it's pretty awesome. Of course, nature doesn't care as much about lighting as the camera does here, so I hope all comes through this okay. But I wanted to talk in this month's video about future. And there's going to be some interesting points that I get covered in here, so you really want to stay tuned with this, because so many times we hear about staying in the present, but we don't often hear about considering our future and why that is important. Why is it important to account for that if living in the present is what we're supposed to be doing? Well, one thing that happens is through living in the present, that leads us into our future. Even though we're always in the present moment, we always end up creating something from that moment. And what we're creating is what we refer to as our future. So I want to talk about that today, because future is a really interesting piece when it comes to codes. And codes with future is all about our ability to live in our wholeness. It's our ability to feel complete, our ability to feel and be and exist in our soul self, unchained, untainted, unrestricted by the material world. And what a lot of people fear when they get on that energy pattern of the future is it wrecks their current existence, or that it creates a lot of physical challenges and struggles and a lot of things that detach us from money. And that's why part of this pattern is so important in a lot of belief systems and a lot of cultures. There's a lot of things that tie to it, particularly like in the Buddhist traditions, and doing with a minimal lifestyle and things like that. And this has nothing to do with poverty. It's actually about a preference and ability to enjoy being alone, or being with oneself, or being in nature, or being with things that are not operating under, say, that material, money-based system. And so it is an ability to work with what is nature and what is natural. So that aspect of creating our wholeness, and that being more of a goal as opposed to something that really distracts us, I think is a really interesting concept to deal with. And again, the way we are going to get to that future space, that future place of wholeness, that pattern there, is to work with our present. And the way that we work through our present is to have foresight. So a big part of being in the moment, being in the present aspect, is to consider how our present actions, our present choices, our present decisions are going to affect things. How they'll affect ourselves, how are they going to affect others, how are they going to affect the future generations coming in. And I think anybody out there who is a parent, who's invested in the direction things are going, as much as they might be in the present, they can't say that they're not shooting for the future somewhere. Because if we were never going to have a future, if there was never going to be another day, we really would have no concern with it. There really would be no concern for focusing. So on one hand, yes, I totally agree with Eckhart Tolle, and all we have is the present moment, and that's all that ever really exists. And in another hand, we do need to consider that piece of how our choices are going to affect things. How are our choices going to affect the experiences that we have in our future present? There's a concept for you, our future present moment. And so when we look at these pieces and how they combine together, and when we implement foresight into the future concept, in considering what our future is that we're trying to create, or that we're working with, or that we're developing, what we come across is we actually unlock the inner chemist within us. We unlock the alchemy energy, which is so incredible, because that's a huge part of creating. That's a huge part of being able to be heard, to get the messages out, to having people listen. And so as we're doing that, we need that alchemist. We need that creative energy to open up. So the foresight becomes a really powerful tool for us in that process. And I want to talk about foresight and how that relates to the codes. Because in foresight, we would think that foresight can be very deceptive in many ways. We can think foresight is trickery. And I think that is a big piece of foresight, is that things are not as they appear oftentimes. Things are not as we might imagine them. They might appear to be good, but if we really consider all of their aspects or dimensions, they're maybe not as favorable as we think. It's kind of like, I like to explain it sometimes as it's that difference between that wild torrent affair that's going to burn out in a couple of weeks, which might be a great experience in the immediate aspect, but in the long run, it has a lot of consequences that can create trauma in our energy patterns. It can create a lot of destruction depending on the situation. It can create a lot of different unfavorable things, and in the long run, it doesn't become sustainable. So the other choice is, do we want somebody there for a moment, or do we want somebody there for a lifetime, or forever, or however you want to do it? I know for me, it's like I've talked about with Orly, that light is with me forever, and that's a love I want. Whether she's with me physically or not, that's a love that I want, and that's a love that sustains. So when we use foresight, what we're doing is a couple of things. We're looking at things not just for how they appear to be to our physical eyes, but what they're really about. And then we're also looking at the aspect of things from, you know, what is their wholeness? What is the effects that they're going to have? What are the different dimensions and the different layers? And we're looking at also dispelling the lies. It's not just seeing things beyond what our eyes see, but it is dispelling the lies that we might see around things. A lot of people, for example, think long-term relationships might be really, really boring, but if we get down to the wholeness and the truth, and we can see long picture beyond the immediate chemistry of any situation, whether that's a relationship or a job or a home or anything else, then we can really get down to whether it's something that's going to work for us. We can really get down to whether that's a future that we want to create for ourselves. And those are important pieces. Now, in looking at the different pieces that we're dealing with and our current influences, there's two really key pieces that are coming up around this time and next month in particular, here in August and September. And those are patience and trust. And those can be some really, really tough pieces for people, right? I mean, I admit, I've had a lot of struggles with patience, especially earlier in my life, and a lot of people now go, man, you're just so patient, and you're so calm, and you're so, okay with so many things. And yet at the same time, I went through a lot of impatience to get there. Now, patience, what's really interesting with it, and why it becomes such a powerful tool, is because it runs on a code pattern of being able to command things. In other words, you get to really choose the direction that things are going to go. And so you're working from the present moment, but you're simultaneously creating the future at the same time. So when you look at that component and you say, wow, okay, so patience gives me the ability to command or to direct the way things are going to go in my life. Pretty powerful stuff right there. So that's huge. That's absolutely huge. And then we have trust. And trust is this incredible piece that is all about our success patterns. So whenever we're going to step into a successful future, for example, there's going to be things that are going to come up that we're going to have to trust. We're not going to have all the answers. As much foresight as we can implement into something, there's no way to 100% see all of the pieces there, because we're functioning in a human existence. Granted, the more we operate from our soul self, the more that we can see, but we're still in a human body. So we still have some of those deceptions and some of those things that are going to go on. So we have to really tune inward and get to that trust piece. We have to really get in there and say, is this a situation I can trust? What is my gut saying? What is my heart saying? You know, how are those different pieces coming together for me? Because unless we can trust something, unless that's really there, and we've had the foresight to know that we can trust it and not just go, oh, I should be able to trust it, right? Because my eyes tell me I can. You have to really get in there and look at that chain reaction that's going to happen along the way. So when we do that, now we're starting to implement our pieces of being able to command things into success. Pretty powerful, right? So if we're combining patience and we're combining trust together, we now have an ability to create a nearly unstoppable success. So are there going to be jealous people out there? Yeah, probably. There's always going to be somebody who's not happy, no matter how wonderful and perfect and beautiful you are or whatever. But that's their own insecurities. But when you're standing in these spaces, you're in command of the situation, which means even when people do have their issues coming up, you still get to choose the direction things are going. That's really cool. Let me repeat that again. Even when other people have their stuff coming up, you get to choose the direction things are going to go. So you place yourself in the position of being the creator of the direction of your life. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful concept to look at. So now, as we start to bring all these different pieces together and we implement this aspect of future and we implement this aspect of foresight into things, right? And then we implement this piece of patience and we implement this piece of trust, we now have a wholeness that stands in strength that is not having to go through physical world challenges. So you see, we move from just the straight future piece, which is very similar to the end result. The only differences being is that we've released the heavy-duty physical challenges. I found this really, really powerful. And one of the things that I wanted to bring into this video related to all of this was connected to a conversation I was having a couple of months ago with somebody. And they were talking about these inventions they were doing. And they were talking about, well, if I invent this, then I can get someplace in an hour instead of 2 hours. Or I can get there in 15 minutes instead of 2 hours or an hour and a half. And you know, it really made me think this aspect of faster, 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 and thinking about, yeah, it sounds like a nice idea. It sounds like a, you know, something that people would buy into, but it involved this piece of impatience. You know, what they were dealing with, what they didn't have, that they hadn't mastered, was the patience, the journey part of it, the piece that really allows things to unfold. And when I was thinking about this conversation that we were having connected to this, one of the things that made me really, really sad was how much our future generations are moving into all this technology and moving into, we gotta push technology, we gotta push machinery, we gotta push robots, we gotta push this. And how much have we lost because we didn't implement the foresight, we didn't implement the patience along the way. We lost some of those pieces for the sake of material goods, for the sake of money, which ends up meaning nothing in the long run. And when we get down to it, we've lost a bigger piece. And the bigger piece that we lose with technology, that a lot of people forget about, is this: our connection with nature. Because even though things took us a little bit longer in years gone by, even though we worked a little bit harder, what was the differences in our life? I mean, a lot of people can say, well, we didn't have this electronic gadget, we couldn't do this in that amount of time. But so what? What we lost was connection to the earth. We lost our connection to nature. And that is a piece that our future generations shouldn't have to deal with. That is a piece that is not fair to them to miss out on. And I don't mean missing out on all kinds of hard work, because when we look at it, all those things that we did by hand, when we handcrafted things, when we did even the daily tasks like laundry and things like that by hand, we had a connection with everything. We were feeding emotions into things. We were sharing a piece of ourselves. We were connecting with the material. We were connecting with the woods. We were connecting with the elements. All the different pieces. Fire from a fireplace. We were connecting with the water from the well. We were connecting with all of these different components. And they were untainted by the chemicals. They were untainted by machinery. They were untainted by things. They still had human touch. And that is something that no machinery, no technology can ever do. It cannot implement the center of the heart. It cannot implement the soul's energy. It cannot implement human touch into it. And I think we really need to consider this. When you also look at things, people had fresh air when they were back in these days. They had where they weren't working these heavy-duty jobs full of stress and pressure. Yes, there was their own stresses, and yes, there were their own pressures. And built into that was also huge senses of accomplishment, not an empty accomplishment for the sake of money. We need to find our balance. The balanced living is where we thrive. The balanced living is where we get to enjoy it all. The balanced living is where our wholeness is. So I'm really hoping that you're going to consider this month. Isn't it worth just a little extra patience? Isn't it worth tuning in to see if I can trust this from inside? Isn't it worth a little bit of foresight before I make a decision? Take care, everybody. Step into your power. Be in your wholeness. That's the space that you're going to find the sustaining joy. Love you. Take care. See you next month.